Hello and welcome back to Intro to Physical Anthropology. I'm David Leitner, I'm your instructor, and today we're going to explore a little bit about Homo erectus in the wider world. In previous videos, you know that we've talked about the fact that Homo erectus is the first hominin to leave Africa, so today let's meet some of these Homo erectus populations outside of Africa. Okay. The first one, which I mentioned before, are the finds at Dmanisi in the Republic of Georgia. This is the earliest evidence for hominins outside of Africa. They're about 1.7 million years old. Splitters tend to classify it in with ergaster instead of erectus. And certainly it has many similarities to early African erectus types. It's extremely important in part because it showed us that humans left Africa almost as soon. I say humans. I have a habit of calling everybody in genus Homo human. But it means that Homo erectus left Africa almost as soon as it evolved there. It means that erectus is adaptable to very different ecosystems. This site is a very mountainous ecosystem as opposed to the hot equatorial plains and forests where many of the Homo erectus in Africa are found. So it's not a stretch to say they are very adaptable behaviorally. We find stone tools with this of the Oldowan industry. And only the Oldowan industry in this case. Now, in Indonesia, we've got presence from 1.8 to 1.6. It's closer to 1.6, really, million years ago. And possibly persisting as recently. This slide's a little out of date. It says 27 to 53. Those dates have been revised. It's probably closer to 70,000, 60 to 70,000 at this point. But it does mean that there are parts of the world where Homo erectus survived until very recently. Homo sapiens only left Africa about 70,000 years ago, just to put things in perspective. Most of the specimens that have been found on the island of Java. Some of that is probably just due to the fact that the infrastructure was set up, so that's where people were looking, and so forth. It is difficult to do archaeological digs in jungle areas, in tropical jungles, because number one, they're very wet, which means, unless something is completely fossilized, it can be heavily damaged. As an example of this, we can talk about the Hobbit. This is not a literal hobbit. This is a nickname for a skull that was found on the island of Flores in Indonesia in the early 2000s. The current thinking is it is incredibly small, much smaller than an adult human, but it doesn't show signs of being a juvenile. It shows all the signs of being a fully grown adult, except that it is incredibly small. As you can see here, compared to the Homo sapiens on the left, the Floresiensis skull on the right is very, very tiny. The current thinking, initially there were several sort of different explanations for this. The first is that it's not a new species at all. This is actually a fairly recent Homo sapiens who either suffered from microcephaly, which is a condition where the cranium does not grow properly or sufficiently, and in fact actually causes some serious intellectual and developmental difficulties in the individuals who have this. Others thought, well, it's a diseased individual of some sort, but all of those explanations were basically along the lines of, this isn't really an older species, this is a Homo sapiens, and we're going to look for... Upon closer inspection, the skull appears to share many, many features with Asian Homo erectus, just smaller. And the evidence is fairly convincing, although there's still a number of detractors out there who say this is not an erectus, this is just a misshapen human skull, Homo sapiens skull. But the bulk of the community at this point is behind the notion that this is a dwarf version of Asian Homo erectus, the result of something called island dwarfism. Island dwarfism is a phenomenon that occurs frequently on islands where resources are limited. And this phenomena observes that on islands where resources are limited, you will find that large animals will evolve smaller forms because they will use less resources and thus have a selective advantage over larger forms. And in fact, actually, we have fossils of dwarf elephants on this same island that stood, 4 to 5 feet at the shoulder. So it's very possible that this is just an example of island dwarfism, that over time, natural selection selected for those who had bodies that required less energy, and smaller bodies require less energy. The dates are very uncertain for lots of different reasons. As I said, they've been updated recently. It really looks like we're looking closer to sort of 60,000 to 100,000 years at most, at the sort of latest, for how old this might be. Though it's also possible it could be much, much older than that. And like I say, it is still highly contentious in many circles. In China, to sort of round out our sort of Asian Homo erectus finds here, we've got a number of younger fossils between 800 and 200,000 years old. Stone tools indicate, however, they might have been present as long ago as 1.6 million years. So, yeah, there's a big question mark there. Just how long did it take to get there? 1.6 wouldn't be unreasonable, 200,000 years to travel that distance, actually probably very doable. The famous or infamous Peking Man was found in 1929. That's what you're looking at here in Shukudian Quarry. It was, like most specimens, sort of retroactively recognized as Homo erectus, and was very important because it is, it at the time was some of the first evidence of human origins outside of Africa. Finally, Europe. In Europe, the fossils of erectus in Europe tend to be very different from both the African and the Asian erectus, and some have similarities to Homo sapiens, more to Neanderthals, and fossils like those there are some in the Grandolina caves that have features that some people think suggest they should be a separate species known as Homo antecessor. So whether Homo antecessor is its own species or is simply European Homo erectus is another of these debates that's going on still. And again, it comes down to the fact that we don't have that many specimens of antecessors, so how are we to say it's not just normal variation within a population? That's always a big question mark. This is the boy of Grandolina, a juvenile, very young juvenile Homo erectus / antecessor, and is one of those individuals. We'll find out next time, actually. Grandolina is an amazing cave complex because we found lots of great fossil evidence from very recent to 800 or 1,000 years ago or more. So it's very interesting. But that's your quick tour of Homo erectus around the world. Every every niche they moved into, they sort of adapted to. There are sort of slight variations regionally all around the world, and yet still underlying similarities. So, again, we think it's still all one species, although in the future we'll see that changes a little bit. So that's that. Thank you for joining me, and I hope you're all taking care of yourself, and have a great week. I will see you soon.